former colleague Jimmy Spratt, who passed away this morning. And when devolution returned to Northern Ireland in 2007 after the St Andrews Agreement, I sat beside Jimmy in that now famous photograph in the Long Gallery when Dr Paisley sat down with the leadership of Sinn Féin for the first time. And I mention that because Jimmy, like me, believed very much in building a shared future. So he wanted everyone here to feel at home in Northern Ireland, and he wanted to make devolution work. And he never shied away from the challenge of trying to keep Northern Ireland moving in the right direction, and I just wanted to acknowledge that today. I will miss him and his quiet, determined support, but it was comforting for me and indeed for my DUP colleagues that the comments of ministers from all of the other parties today at our executive meeting reflected Jimmy's qualities and the contribution that he had made to politics here in Northern Ireland. So to Linda, to his sons of whom he was so proud, to his daughters-in-law and to his precious grandchildren, I send my love and my deepest sympathy. Ministers discussed the latest progress with the COVID virus this afternoon, and I'm pleased to say that today we have had further positive news in relation to transmission levels of the virus. We are continuing to keep the R rate for cases at well below 1. This week it's between 0.65 and 0.75. And the case positivity rate is down to 5% and falling, pointing to the epidemic coming back under control. And we're seeing quite a dramatic fall in the number of people testing positive for the virus. I want to take a moment to reflect on this significant achievement, because just over 2 months ago, on the highest day for reported cases, 2,315 people tested positive for the virus. The figure from today's dashboard is 163. And the pressure on our hospitals are thankfully gradually easing. The number of COVID patients in ICU departments have dropped below 30. And I do welcome the news today that there will soon be a scaling up of high-priority surgery and a rebuilding of elective care services at Belfast City Hospital as the Nightingale facility is stepped down. These advances are due to a number of factors. There's no doubt that the everyday actions of our citizens have helped save lives, and we are grateful for the many sacrifices people have made. But I've always said that lockdowns cannot be our only option to control this virus. Over this last year, we have worked hard on a four-nations basis to roll out new and effective treatments, efficient test and track system, and of course successful vaccination programmes. And I'm pleased to see the continued extension of asymptomatic testing across public, private and local government sectors, and this is key to identifying and containing localised outbreaks. Our vaccines programme is accelerating. It's currently in stage 3, which is significantly ahead of schedule. And by the end of this month, the SSE Arena will have the capacity to provide 40,000 vaccines per week, in addition to the ongoing work in regional centres and GP surgeries. Over the course of today, the number of people in Northern Ireland who have received the first dose protection will pass 600,000 marks, and this is another significant, very welcoming and encouraging milestone. It's not merely a statistic, but it's reassurance for our grandparents, mums and dads and sons and daughters across our community. The proportion of new hospital admissions with COVID-19 aged 80 or over has reduced from approximately 40% to around 20%, suggesting that the vaccine programme is having a real impact protecting older people. Now, there is no doubt that this has been a difficult year for all of us, and the individual actions of citizens have been key to us gaining control of the virus. But we're now at the point where we can have the confidence to begin to lift that burden from your shoulders. And next week we will see the start of a phased return for our school children, and we will assess the impact of this at the next executive review on March the 16th as we step forward along our pathway to easing restrictions. I'm fully aware of the frustration that many, particularly businesses, feel at this point that we have not been able to lay out a full-scale timetable for opening up our society. I feel that too. But there will be an ongoing and active assessment of a wide range of data and indicators. Economic, education and community indicators will be part of executive decision-making, as well as the health data comprising issues such as isolation, emotional well-being, economic performance, business vulnerability and education impacts. And of course, restrictions may only remain as long as they can be demonstrated to be proportionate and necessary. So our early focus will be on education, the family and outdoor activities as we start out on the road back towards normality. It is welcome news that the current health indicators are positive, and of course we have the benefit now in the weeks ahead of having the seasons with us as well. So the journey over this last year has been so very difficult for so many of us, but both literally as well as figuratively, the brighter and better days are now within our grasp. And finally, before I hand over to the Deputy First Minister, let me very much welcome the 5-year extension of a major Ministry of Defence contract for Belfast firm Thales, a £98.4 million contract which will support 119 high-quality jobs and a great many more in the supply chain. And of course this follows on from an MOD contract for Spirit Aerospace, and it's really good to see local firms benefiting from these national defence contracts. Michelle.
Thanks, Arlene, and good afternoon to everyone. And can I also start by extending my sympathies to the family of Jimmy Spratt. I knew Jimmy myself in his days in the Assembly and would always had a good working relationship with him, and he was certainly a character. So, Arlene, to yourself and your DUP colleagues, I just want to extend my sympathies also. And also to the 3 families that have been bereaved as a result of COVID in the last 24 hours. Our thoughts and sympathies are with all of you also during this very difficult time. We all know that these have been very dark and been very difficult days for everybody. And this week the Executive has published our pathway to brighter days ahead. And I'm pleased that today we're able to signal further progress on our road towards gradually lifting restrictions. We have seen another marked decline in the daily numbers of new positive cases over the past week. The figure for new positive tests was 163 today. And while this is still too high, it does represent huge progress in suppressing community transmission of the virus. This is reflected in the current R number for new cases, which is in the region of 0.65 to 0.75. And that's a really encouraging sign and one of the indicators that we would consider in moving forward. Maintaining the R number below 1 means the epidemic is shrinking and that case numbers will continue to fall. Our vaccination programme continues to drive us forward, and by tomorrow we expect that over 600,000 vaccines will have been administered. We are seeing increasing evidence of the effectiveness of the vaccination programme and the protection that it's providing across our community. For example, today there are just 20 active COVID outbreaks in our care homes, and that's compared to 150 active outbreaks back in the autumn. These are all very positive signals as we begin to move towards recovery. And on Monday we will take our first small step out of the current restrictions when the youngest school children will return to classroom for face-to-face learning. This will be followed by years 12 to 14 on the 22nd of March. And then, subject to the levels of community transmission, we are aiming to have all students safely return to school as soon as possible after the Easter holidays. The Executive as a whole has placed a priority on the education and well-being of our young people, and we are making use of the headroom we have to get them back into school. And we hope that that sends a very strong message that whilst we will be led by the evidence and not by the calendar, we will provide dates for future easements as soon as we are in a position to do so with confidence. We understand that people want certainty and they want time to prepare and to plan, and they also want to hope. And we recognise that people want exact data parameters that will enable us to move through each stage. However, there are still too many variables to allow us to do that with any degree of certainty. We have to take account of all of the evidence at each step, including the emergence of new variants. And we need time to monitor the impacts of each relaxation before we can move on to the next. But what we can say very clearly is that we will move ahead as soon as the circumstances allow us to. We have built a formal 4-weekly review into the pathway. The first of those comprehensive reviews will be on the 16th of March, and then subsequently on the 15th of April, 13th of May and 10th of June. By that review date, on the 10th of June, we hope to be well advanced along the pathway and looking forward to brighter months over the summer and beyond. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ministers. Can I start by asking you about the political developments of the last 24 hours? The fact that the government has decided that it is going to unilaterally extend the grace periods, and that led the Irish Minister Simon Coveney to say that the EU is now negotiating with a partner that cannot be trusted. Can I ask what your views are on this?
Well, I think that the British Government have again acted in bad faith, and they have demonstrated by their very deed that they are untrustworthy, that they're not reliable, that they're not true to their word when it comes to a negotiation. That's form which the British Government have demonstrated time and time again. In this case, I believe they're on the wrong side of public opinion, and they're clearly on the wrong side of international law. This action was completely unnecessary also. The Joint Committee only met last week. I myself have raised the issues of concern, issues where we wanted to find resolution. There was a commitment in that meeting to the protocol. There was a commitment to find solutions, and that should have been allowed to run its course, and that meeting should be reconvened again before the end of the month to progress things. So I think what the British Government today have done over the course of the last day is another solo run, and demonstrates extreme bad faith and leads to even more uncertainty for us here in terms of the implications and the outworking of what is the hardest possible Brexit.
So the UK Government have a commitment to ensure, under their own domestic legislation and indeed under the protocol, that the internal market of the United Kingdom works, and clearly it's not working at present. And so they have taken these actions to try and mitigate. It doesn't deal with all of the issues, certainly not to deal with some of those issues. And it was quite clear to me, having attended the Joint Committee last week, that the European Commission was simply not listening to what was going on in Northern Ireland, and therefore there was a need to act, because of course these grace periods come to an end at the end of the month, and if the UK Government hadn't taken action, that would have caused untold difficulties for our ports. And indeed, you will have heard from the Chief Vet today talking about the fact that it would have led to up to 36,000 checks in relation to the port at Larne. So there was a need to do something. Of course, I listened with interest to Simon Coveney's comments today. He talks about not having a partner you can do business with. I have to say he should reflect on that, because he's not listening to the Unionist people of Northern Ireland, the entirety of the Unionist people of Northern Ireland. He's ignoring them and thinking that they'll just go away. Well, we'll not go away, and we need to be listened to in relation to our very deep concerns about trade diversion, which of course is covered in the protocol as well, and is one of the reasons why you would trigger Article 16. So he needs to reflect on his words today and what he's been saying.
Can I also ask about the letter that has been sent by the LCC, in which they say they no longer support the Belfast Agreement because of all that has gone on with the protocol? Can I ask you, First Minister, whether or not you knew that they were going to be sending this letter, and had you been given sight of it before it was sent?
Well, first of all, let me say it's not surprising to me, after having met the LCC this day last week. They were very clear about the difficulties with the protocol. I have not seen the letter before it went, and why would I? This is a letter coming from the LCC to the Prime Minister and to the Taoiseach. I do welcome the fact that they have said they will use peaceful and democratic means. Very much welcome that. It's so important that we deal with matters through politics and through the constitutional way of dealing with issues, whether that's through politics or through the courts or whatever. I think that that is to be welcomed. And they're saying that they're withdrawing their support until their rights are restored. So it's not something that is definitive. If we can deal with the issues caused by the protocol, then I didn't support the Belfast Agreement, but these people did very wholeheartedly support the Belfast Agreement. So they are saying that at the moment they can't support it because of the damage the protocol has done to East-West relationships.
I think the question that needs to be answered is 23 years after the Good Friday Agreement, why loyalist paramilitary groups still exist, why they're still carrying out organised crime, racketeering, extortion, holding communities to ransom. And the question has to be asked 23 years after the peace accord, why they are still in existence. And I think everybody in political leadership has a responsibility to encourage and to tell these groups to leave the stage. There is no place for them in today's society.
Afternoon, Ministers. You mentioned in your recovery pathway which you've laid out that come the 10th of June you hope that things will be pretty much hopefully back to normal here. Of course it will be a very different picture in the Republic because of the fact that their vaccine rollout is much slower, the fact that they're moving at a very different pace. How much of a headache is it going to be for you and the Executive managing your restrictions, easing them, while just across the border they're going to be struggling to keep pace?
I think that across these two islands it's really important that we continue to work together. At different stages of the pandemic, there's been times when, for example, we have been hailed as an excellent example of how to deal with the pandemic. There's been times when you look towards the 26 counties where they were the best in Europe and then the worst in Europe. There's been times whenever Britain has been at the same point. I think that it's crucially important that if we're going to be successful in the months ahead, that we continue to work together as best we can. I hope that we get to the point where we're aligned on all these issues, including vaccination rollout, because obviously what happens in one part of this island has implications for what happens on the other part. So I think that I want us to get to the point where we're aligned on travel, we're aligned on vaccinations, we're aligned in terms of the restrictions. That will serve the public well in terms of being able to deal with the pandemic.
So it's very clear that we are going to be finished our vaccination programme and the Republic of Ireland will still be in the midst of theirs. That does bring headaches, and I think we will have to, of course, hear from our Chief Medical Officer in relation to that, whether we need to take any actions to make sure that and I think this is really important I say this, because if you have people who are interacting with people who have been vaccinated, then it becomes less effective, as it were, because the virus learns that, and then we would be in difficulty. So I think there will be a need to look at this in the future. I very much hope that we can continue in Northern Ireland to go in the same trajectory that we are in relation to hospital numbers, in relation to transmission of cases. We are awaiting data in relation to the transmissibility of the virus when you have the vaccine. I think that will be really important. But already it appears that our hospital numbers, and I referred to this in my comments, have gone down, particularly in the over 80s, and I think that that is very significant.
Just on the protocol, and Simon Coveney's claim today that the UK Government cannot be trusted when it comes to the negotiations. Can I ask the First Minister, does she trust the UK Government in terms of doing what's best, in your opinion, for unionists? Because the Secretary of State made it clear today that while we will be extending these grace periods, that the protocol is very much here to stay.
Well, the Secretary of State's entitled to say that, but I think he also has indicated a step change as of yesterday in the House of Commons in relation to actually listening to the concerns that unionism has in relation to the protocol. I'll continue to work with our government, including the Prime Minister, in trying to find a replacement. You will have noted his comments in the House of Commons yesterday that nothing is off the table, so let us see what that means. I do have to say to Simon Coveney that he should reflect on the fact that his party colleague took a photograph of a bombed customs post to Europe to make a point in relation to not having infrastructure on the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. What sort of message did that send to people? Was it that terrorism works? Because I think that's a very bad message to send. And I said at the time it was reckless. I said it was very careless. But he did it, and I think that he needs to reflect on what he did.
Well, I think the British Government have again demonstrated that they are untrustworthy, that they do not fulfil their side of an agreement. They have form in this, of course. They have threatened to breach international law on many occasions. They have actually legislated to breach international law, so their actions doesn't surprise me. However, I would say that there is a forum in which to resolve issues. That is the Joint Committee. It only met last week. That's where solutions should be found. Unilateral actions actually only help to up the ante and create even more uncertainty. What needs to happen is that all sides of the negotiating need to sit around the negotiating table, sit down and talk about how we can iron out the issues that are the reality of a post-Brexit world, the hardest possible Brexit, and those that delivered us Brexit need to shoulder the responsibility for the implications which we are now living through.
Ministers, you've both today spoken about the low cases and how well we're all doing. Is there any possibility of you giving any reassurance today to the public that you'll be announcing some sort of restrictions, the easing of some restrictions on March 16th on the first review date, if the cases continue on the way they are at the moment?
I think what we set out in the pathway was that we would be looking at, yes, we would certainly look at the health indicators, and those are very important to any decision that we take. And I am really pleased to see the way in which the health indicators are going. And also, of course, the economic indicators and the society indicators. So those are the sorts of discussions that we will have. Obviously, we'll want to take advice on that before the 16th of March. But let's wait and see what happens on the 16th of March. Let's not try and make any hostages to fortune. I think it's very clear that I think we should be moving, but let us not make any hostages to fortune until we get there and we see what the data tells us.
And as soon as we're in a position to give certainty, that's where we will immediately move to. Things do look good today. You know, the virus transmission is on the downward trajectory, but we also know from experience in the past year that that can quickly reverse itself. So I think just with the continued effort and support of the public, we'll get to the point very quickly where we'll be able to announce what does the first stage in lifting the restrictions, what that looks like. The next stage in post is the 16th of March. And we're very much using the period in between these 4-week reviews to point to what will be coming down the track. So we again, not to give any sort of false hope today, things do look good, and let's hope that we can make some progress on the 18th of March review date, or 16th of March review date.
And are you both singing off the same hymn sheet on this plan, and do you fully believe in this approach that you've signed up to? Is there not some sense of fear that differences among executive parties could hinder the rollout of this strategy?
Well, look, this was a strategy that we landed on after long deliberations. We don't have a single-party government in Northern Ireland. We have a 5-party coalition, so it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that different parties take different emphasis in relation to how we go forward. This is the plan, as was agreed by the Executive. It is there by consensus. There was no vote taken. And I think we just move forward on that. I hope that we can accelerate the plan. I've made no secret about that. So let's see where we are on the 16th of March so that we can move forward.
So the Corp review of the Executive is obviously has endorsed this plan. This plan, I think, gives us the best chance to actually ease us out of the restrictions in the most speedy manner as possible. I also think it gives us the best chance to avoid reversing. None of us want to be in a position where we're lifting restrictions one day and then within a short period of time having to reimpose them. I think the public would be very, and rightly so, unforgiving of that. So I think that sticking to a plan allows us to do this in a staged and gradual way. It's the safest way to do it. We understand the public are fatigued, and I feel that too, but we have a bit of a journey still to travel, and we'd ask people to work with us, and we'll get there as soon as we can in the safest possible manner.
Good afternoon, Ministers. In terms of education, you say you touched on that today in the Executive. So on Monday, the preschools and primaries 1 to 3 will be returning for 2 weeks and then going back to remote learning for a week and then off on Easter holidays. Is there any way that the Executive is going to review that? I know you said you were going to discuss papers maybe brought by the Education Minister next week in terms of that, to keep the children in school for those 3 weeks so you're not causing maybe confusion amongst parents and also the children.
Yes, well, we hope that we will have a definitive answer in relation to that next week. It's certainly our hope, and I think it's a collective hope, that the children can stay at school and not have to come out of school for that 1 week of remote learning, bearing in mind that they'll be off school for St Patrick's Day as well during that time. So it is important that we give that clarity next week so that parents can plan and the teachers can plan as well.
And then also, in terms of the 10th of June, you said we could be well advanced by that stage. Is that what you're looking for in terms of step 5? I know you said you weren't going to give any dates, but is that kind of an indication of where you hope to be? Do you hope to be at step 5 when it comes to the 10th of June?
Well, clearly that's what we've set out in our plan. Of course, we hope that's where we get to, but there are so many variables that we're very cautious not to give people the false hope. But certainly if things keep going in the way in which they are, if the public keep working with us, then we're very hopeful that we can get there. But there are just so many uncertainties in dealing with the pandemic that we're reluctant after a year of so much self-sacrifice from so many people that we don't give them any false dawn. So I think we're hopeful, but that's as far as probably we can go for today. But as soon as we can give certainty, that's where we'll immediately move to. Thank you.